good, guys? Welcome back to the first take. You know what time it is, people. It's time for more histories and lore of Game of Thrones. This one is season 4, I think episode 7 overall that I've done. So let's do this. Goodies.
You can hear a maester coming long before you see him, thanks to the jangling chains he's forced to wear around his neck. It's meant to remind him of his servitude, like the collar of a dog. You can't remove it, even to sleep. Each link signifies mastery, or at least what those withered old men in the Citadel consider mastery, of a different area of study. Gold for the study of sums and accounts, silver for healing, iron for war, black iron for ravenry, lead for poisons, and Valyrian steel for the higher mysteries. Only one maester in 100 forges such a link. Only one maester in 100 has the sense the gods gave a goat. Though I admit that no one has performed true magic in centuries. We sit in a room, mumbling over a candle of dragon glass, trying to make it catch fire. After a sleepless night of failure, we're supposed to admit to our own limitations. To win the link, we are supposed to lose our curiosity. I never did. In time, the Archmaesters decided more links were useless to a man who wouldn't be chained by them. They took my chain and expelled me from the Citadel. Their loss. The chain as a whole is supposed to signify the realm. One cannot have only lords or only knights. One needs farmers, smiths, merchants, shepherds, and the like. Like a chain forged of many different metals. An obvious and trivial point, disguised with pomposity. Much like the maesters themselves, they study without learning, and proudly pass down the same knowledge that was passed down to them, with no addition. Perhaps such is to be expected, when one considers the kinds of men who become maesters. The youngest sons of noble families, dutiful and timid, raised in the shadow of their older brothers. Or bastards and peasant boys whose minds are easily satisfied by the knowledge of their next meal. Because bold men will not be chained. They dare to ask questions that the maesters fear to answer.
True shit.
They will look at a living man and ask, how? And they will look at the dead and ask, what if?
And you did it, bruv. You fucking did that shit.
The Iron Bank dates from when Braavos was still the secret city, filled with runaways and refugees from the Valyrian slave lords. The first tradesmen to achieve success realized that if they pooled their resources, they could loan money to their less fortunate fellows and build a better Braavos. For a profit, of course. First, they needed a space to store their combined gold, safe from thieves, and more importantly, each other. For the business rivalries that created their fortunes were not easily put aside. They found an abandoned iron mine outside the city, and sealed its only entrance with heavy gates and bars, and set guards supplied by every principal investor. Each guard watched the gate, and the other guards.
Yeah.
Over time, this distrust vanished as the investors gave up their other businesses and poured their energies into the new endeavour, now called the Iron Bank, after the mine. We've since moved to more spacious quarters, but we still keep our first vault, not merely to remind us of our roots, but because we did not become the world's greatest repository of wealth by wasting assets, no matter how minor. If you're an aspiring merchant, you come to us to buy ships and goods. If you're an aspiring shopkeeper, you come to us to buy your shop. Whatever you need in this world, we are the conduit. Even a throne can be yours if you're an aspiring king, or stay yours if you're a sitting one. Just ask House Lannister of Westeros. We are not the only bank in this world. Every free city has its own, but when those banks need gold, they come to us. We lend to princes, kings, merchants, and tradesmen. If a prince or king can't pay us back, well, the world lacks for loyal men, not ambitious ones. We simply fund the rise of new princes and kings, and they tend to honour our investment.
Okay.
If a merchant refuses to repay us, well, the vicissitudes of trade are well known, and Braavos is full of men who are not.
Yep.
one way or another, the Iron Bank will have its due.
Ah, that's interesting.
Sellsword pretty much sums it up. A poor man has a sword. A rich man needs a man with a sword. Gold is exchanged. If the poor man knows how to use the sword, maybe he becomes a rich man. One way or another. I'm sure sellswords have a long and illustrious history, but if you meet a sellsword who knows it, best hire someone else. A sellsword should be good at one thing, getting paid to kill people. It's not an easy job. Most people try to kill you back, and at least a few of them know how. The ones that don't, well, they often come in enough pretty armour to ruin an afternoon. A lot of high lords turn their noses up at sellswords. They say they can't trust a man who sells his allegiance to the highest bidder. I don't blame them. Much cheaper for them to own an army from birth, either by people being on their lands or by their ancestors swearing a few oaths. But here's the thing. No sellsword has ever fled from the winning side. If your hired companies are running away from you, it's because you're not on that side, and you didn't pay them enough to die with you. Not that you could. Sellswords don't get rich dying for their lords.
True.
Sellswords don't really get rich. Some of the Eastern companies on Essos do fine. The Golden Company, the Second Sons, the Windblown. Always a bit of fighting to be had in the free cities. Even if those merchant princes can be as tight as an old man's cunt. But then you're stuck in the heat and dust, hoping some dumb rich prick doesn't try to hire your company to fight Dothraki, because your dumb greedy captain would probably take it. Hedge knights, now, are a different breed. Take a sellsword and remove the scents. They get their name from where they sleep, under the edges of the Seven Kingdoms, in ditches, in stables. They don't have the family name or the purse like real knights, so they spend all their money on armour and a horse, and ride in tourney after tourney in the hope of impressing some lord or winning some prize. One loss, and a lot of them are ruined.
Okay.
They can't ransom back their armour, even if they win. Think what a knight's good for. Killing men. You know how you train for killing men? By trying to kill men. Not prancing round with a blunted stick, bowing and waiting your turn. Maybe you think I'm just insulting the competition so you hire me instead. Well, of course I am. So don't hire me. Hire a sellsword with educated airs who tells you all about the great battles he's heard of. Or a hedge knight who's won a few tourneys starting to build his name. And the man you're fighting against? He hires me.
I like that.
Wildlings. I suppose that's flattery coming from you southerners who'd kneel to a pig if your daddy did. We call ourselves the Free Folk, or at least most of us won't kill you for calling us so. Some will, aye, but that's just the way of it in the true north, beyond your great white wall, where your laws and kingdoms end, and men live free, and die cold. For we live close to our land, and she's a terrible wife. Fail to obey her, and she kills you. On the frozen shore, so deep is the snow that men ride chariots made of walrus bones, pulled by packs of dogs. The Hornfoots have it easy in the mountains. The cold so hardens and blackens the soles of their feet that they don't even need boots. The cave people spend their lives in the dark, doing God's know what with God's know who, or what. The Thens have one of the only nice bits of land up here. A valley in the far north, near the end of the Frostfangs, with game, copper, and tin for shiny bronze weapons. Better than the rusted old blades most of us have. With such advantages, they could be a generous, friendly race. They're not. As young boys, they burn their faces and rub ash and dirt into their wounds. Scars more than their face, I think. They follow their Magnar, who's the kind of man who can rule these kinds of men. I know what you southerners are thinking. And no, the Magnar is not a king. More like their god. Though not one you'd care to follow if you don't sleep with your eyes open. And then there are the giants. A proud race, as old as the Frostfangs, and about as tough. They speak the old tongue, when they speak at all, though they understand more common than they let on. They're not the monsters you southerners think. Once I was caught in a winter storm so cold, I knew I'd freeze to death before it broke. Lucky for me, I stumbled on a sleeping giant, cut open her belly, and crawled right up inside her. Kept me warm enough, but the stink nearly done me. The worst thing was, when she woke up, she took me for her babe.
Oh.
Suckled me for 3 whole moons before I could get away.
What?
But there's times I still miss the taste of giant's milk. I thank the gods she was in a good mood and lacked a husband. An angry giant, you want no part of that. Whatever our differences, one
Nuts.
thing unites us.
Nuts.
When we look south, we see hundreds of feet of ice piled high, manned by shivering crows in black cloaks. Our wardens penning us up here, warning us away from warmer lands, softer beds, and prettier girls. But the cold winds are rising. The Hornfoots couldn't stand against them, nor the Thens, nor the giants. First they kill you, then they send your dead against you. We faced extinction, every one of us, but then man's raider came to us and rallied every nation of the free folk, as no man ever has. He was a crow once and knows your ways. For thousands of years, we've sucked fear of your kind from our mother's teat. We've been on one side of the wall and you on the other. No more. One of these nights, you're going to hear a knock on your front door. You best not answer.
Hello. Dude, I like the fact that they gave us each distinction of the different groups.
Nobody really knows how the wall was built.
We knew that there was,
Yes,
but
every
they
child
never really
knows
got into
how
it in
the
the show.
days of the first men,
That
Brandon
deep.
the Builder raised the wall with magic and giants and set the Night's Watch to guard it. But nobody thought to write down the story until thousands of years later, and the Septons who did it weren't much for accuracy. I mean, they have knights bumbling around thousands of years before they were knights. Sorry, bad habit. But even if magic and giants built the wall, it's the Night's Watch who have held it. Our order of builders repairs the keeps and towers, digs tunnels, crushes stone for roads and footpaths, and clears away trees wherever the forest presses too close to the wall. Or at least it would, if they had the men, and the tools, and the time. Long ago, when the Night's Watch was at full strength, the builders would quarry blocks of ice from the frozen lake to the haunted forest, dragging them south on sledges to add to the wall. Now, it's all they can do to watch for cracks or signs of melt and make what repairs they can, without men, or tools, or time. The Order of Rangers is the fighting heart of the Night's Watch. They ride beyond the wall, fighting and trading with wildlings, surviving shadow cats and snow leopards. The Rangers are meant to scout out threats to the wall and return to report. And they did, back in the days when men could go north and come back alive. Now they just come back.
Dead.
The Order of Stewards keeps the watch alive. We hunt and farm, tend the horses, milk the cows, gather firewood, cook the meals and bring supplies from the south. Not so heroic, I know, but since the Night's Watch doesn't starve or freeze, I guess we're the only order that still does everything it's supposed to. Without all of us guarding the wall together, well, it probably still wouldn't have ever fallen. Solid ice rising hundreds of feet into the air and running hundreds of miles to the sea. No army is smashing it anytime soon, which is why our enemies have never tried. Well, not directly. The brothers Gendel and Gorn, kings beyond the wall, went under the wall, through ancient caves buried deep in the earth. But on the way back they took a wrong turn and were lost in the darkness. People say that their children's children's children are still down there, looking for a way up, or for more food to find its way down. When our rangers found Arson Isaacs picking away at the wall, he was almost halfway through.
Arson
The rangers
Isaacs.
decided not to disturb him and sealed the way behind him with ice and stone and snow.
Oh.
Some say if you press your ear flat to the wall, you can still hear Arson chipping away with his axe.
Jesus.
100 years ago, another king beyond the wall, Raymond Redbeard, realised the wall's size is both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. He waited for our patrols to pass, and then sent climbers to the now unguarded stretch of the wall. When they reached the top, they dropped ropes and ladders for thousands more wildlings to clamber up. The Night's Watch didn't even know his army had crossed until after the Starks and Umbers had cornered and destroyed him, and that was 100 years ago, when the Watch had many more men than now. Lucky for the Night's Watch, the wall isn't without its own defences. Besides being incredibly tall and thick, the wall is also treacherous.
Many times a patrol will find the broken corpses of wildlings who've tried to climb the wall, only for a piece of it to break off mid-climb, or to have their hold slip as the sun melted the ice just enough. When the light strikes the wall just right, it can even look like it's weeping. 1,000 years ago, the Night's Watch could have lined up shoulder to shoulder along the wall, all the way from Eastwatch by the Sea to the Shadow Tower to meet Mance Rayder and his army. But now Mance isn't bothering to find tunnels under the wall or climb over it. He was a sworn brother once. He knows that the glory of the Night's Watch is behind us. Mance is going to try what no man ever has. He's going to come through the wall. One day I hope Maesters write stories about how we beat him back. Because if we don't, there may not be any more stories to write.
I want a Mance Rayder story, because that's something going on. Why he... I can't remember
From
what
the
it was in
east
the books.
coast
Probably
of the
was.
Vale, the fingers reach out
That's
into
the
the
story
narrow
right
sea.
there, man.
4 rocky peninsulas plagued by wind and rain, and barren to all but the hardiest of weeds. The ancestral home of House Baelish. Our house began with my great-grandfather, a Bravosi sellsword who came to the Vale at the invitation of House Corbray.
Oh.
My grandfather raised himself to the status of hedge knight, and even managed to acquire a bit of land and a keep on the smallest of the fingers, though I do believe he often missed sleeping under his titular hedges. The only thing worse than owning a dreary and desolate land is owning only a small portion of it. Luckily, I didn't spend much time there as a child. During the War of the Ninepenny Kings, a cheap name for a cheap cause, where other men fought for the king my father fought to befriend Hoster Tully, Lord Paramount of the Trident and head of one of the oldest and greatest houses in Westeros. Thanks to my father's heroic efforts, Lord Hoster agreed to foster me at Riverrun with his own children. Until then, my whole world had been a small tower on the gull-stained rocks of the Fingers. But when I first saw the stone walls of Riverrun rising from the Trident, towering over me, back then I was a little more easily impressed. The boy in me thought the gods themselves must live in such a place. I soon learned otherwise. Lord Tully's son, Edmure, was quick to ensure I would never forget myself in their house. He nicknamed me Littlefinger, after my size and homeland, and the name was just cruel enough to stick. His sisters, Lysa and Catelyn, made me a pawn in their kissing game, traded back and forth between them for practice. Needless to say, I enjoyed spending time with them more than Edmure. And as we grew older, the game began to change, as all games do. Lysa grew more bold, and Cat more demure. When Lord Tully announced Cat's betrothal to a brute from the north whom she'd never met, I realised her duty would outweigh any feelings she had for me. Fool that I was, I challenged this Brandon Stark to a duel for her hand. He was a warrior, I was a boy. If Cat had not intervened, he would have killed me and laughed over my corpse. For my insolence, Lord Tully banished me from Riverrun. No matter. I had learned everything I needed by then. I would fight my battles not with swords, but with wits. A few men could match me. Even then, House Baelish might have died out on the rocks of the Fingers. I was again a poor lord, with no allies and no prospects, except, if I were lucky, the daughter of a middling merchant. Then, opportunity arose. The Mad King executed that Brandon Stark and incited a rebellion. My old friend, Lysa Tully, was married off to John Arryn, Lord of the Vale, to cement the alliance against the Iron Throne, bringing her within my circle again. I quickly capitalized on our former affection and persuaded her to have me appointed as controller of customs at Gulltown, the Vale's greatest port. Wars burn gold like wildfire. When I increased the port's income tenfold, her husband took notice of this lowly lord from the Fingers, and when the new and profligate King Robert needed a master of coin who could find gold where no one else could, why, Lord Arryn knew just the man. Once, House Baelish had no lands, no name, and no gold. Now we have quite a lot of each. What new rung will the next generation climb? Let us not be hasty. I'm not finished yet.
We've lost that, innit? That attached to our ancestors.
Any
That
man who calls a poison a woman's weapon is a traitor to his fellow men.
truly wanted to
Dagger,
better their family.
arrow, axe. These are the
Family
arms of
holdings.
passion. But poison is cold, calculating. Poison is the thought that wakes you in the morning and lulls you to sleep at night. You watch your victim die 1,000 times before you ever offer him that fateful taste. Is a man's hate so inferior to a woman's that we are to be denied such a weapon? When I was a boy of 16, a great lord caught me with his mistress. He should have been honored. Instead, the fat old fool challenged me to a duel, thanks to my age and status, only to first blood. But his mistress and his wife warned me which of my parts he intended to draw first blood from. He was strong and fierce, but slow. I cut him quickly, and the duel ended with honor satisfied.
Poison.
Then his wounds festered, and he died. Ever since, men have called me the Red Viper, a name that never fails to draw a laugh from me, as if a single serpent was all I knew of venom. Essence of nightshade is the gentlest of poisons. A drop dissolved into wine will slow a pounding heart and stop a hand from shaking. 3 drops will grant a night of deep and dreamless sleep. 10 drops, and you will have a sleep that does not end. Basilisk blood. It will give cooked meat a savory smell, but if eaten, it produces violent madness in beasts as well as men. A mouse will attack a lion after a taste of basilisk blood. But to a man who knows his art, is not passion a form of madness?
It is.
Widow's blood forces a man's bladder and bowels to fail. He drowns in his own poisons. A slow and painful death. It has earned its name many times, I am sure. The tears of Lys, a rare and costly poison. Clear, tasteless, and odorless. Dissolved in wine or water, it eats at a man's bowels. He dies in agony, which will not appear unusual if the victim is old or sickly. The favorite tool of impatient heirs. Across the world, on certain islands of the Jade Sea, grows a certain plant. The leaves must be aged and soaked in a wash of limes, sugar water, and certain rare spices from the summer isles. Afterward, the potion must be thickened with ash and allowed to crystallize. The process is slow and difficult, the necessaries costly and hard to acquire. The alchemists of Lys know the way of it, and the faceless men of Bravos, and the maesters. Dissolved in wine, it makes the muscles of a man's throat clench tighter than any fist. The victim's face turns as purple as the little crystal seed from which his death was grown. And so we call it the Strangler. Which of these vials would I take from its shelf, you may ask? None. To kill a man at his table or in his bed bores me. To toil hours over a boiling pot, measuring and stirring, bores me. How life begins is always entertaining, and my kind must make sure its end is worth our wait.
Love it.
Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The words of House Martel. A promise to our enemies and a challenge to our lovers. Thousands of years ago, the warrior queen Nymeria crossed into Dorne from Essos, fleeing the dragon lords of Validia. After she landed, she burned her ships, all 10,000 of them, so no cowards could slink home. What a woman! Dornish in spirit before she ever was in flesh. She was lucky to land in Dorne, where powerful women are not locked away in septs and the beds of old men. My ancestor Mors Martel saw her and desired her, and proved that where armies fail, a town may succeed. Wedding his strength to hers, his spear to her son, they subdued all his rivals together.
Oh, the spear in the sun.
After the tradition of her
Nice.
people, House Martel then ruled Dorne as princes, not kings. Unless the eldest child was a daughter, for unlike the rest of Westeros, our loyalty isn't commanded by a cock. We follow a prince or a princess Martel just the same. And we always have. Some people forget that Aegon Targaryen crowned himself lord of 6 kingdoms, not 7. When his sister marched on Dorne, she found no mighty hosts drawn up against her for her dragon to burn and her soldiers to slaughter. The sands swirled, men died, and her dragon saw nothing. The sun shone, men died, and her dragon bowed to our greater fire. The Targaryens retreated with their tails tucked between their legs. Of course, in later years, his descendants would try again. Daeron the First succeeded at great cost and reigned in Dorne for a few glorious months. One night, his steward pulled down a sash by his bed to summon his consorts. Instead, the canopy split open and 100 red scorpions fell on him. He was a Tyrell. You would think he would be used to getting stung. Within a fortnight, House Martell again ruled a free Dorne. Eventually, after centuries of courtship, House Martell got into bed with the Targaryens. We took King Daeron II and his sister for our own before they could take each other, and 6 kingdoms became 7. Even now, I do not blame my ancestors. One look at those long silver locks. It is not every day a man gets to ride a dragon. But they soon learned that you can't leap off a dragon at will. My sister Elia, she married Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and became the princess she already was. In Dorne, she walked among vipers, and none would bite her. In King's Landing, she found herself surrounded by lions.
She's the one that
When
died.
Robert Baratheon rebelled against his rightful king, his future father-in-law, Tywin Lannister, ordered his beast, Gregor Clegane, to rape and murder my sister, along with her helpless children. And men called the Lannisters heroes. Now, Lannisters sit on the Iron Throne, surrounded by the blasted swords of Aegon's broken foes. I wonder if they remember, as I do, that none of those swords are ours. I wonder if they see, as I do, my sister's red blood soaking into the stones of their precious red keep. Maybe they need reminding. The lion may be a mighty beast, but pride always lifts his gaze to the horizon, never seeing in the grass the viper.
I love that. I love that. I love their little story. Oh, that was beautiful. That was actually kind of poetic as well. The warrior queen and the guy who just fell in love and they united the sun and the spear. Oh. But yeah, I want to see a Mance Rayder, some sort of story, see or read. Because I think that would definitely be interesting. A man who was once, part of the... He was once a black brother, so to speak, and who just abandoned his post, and what it was that was in him that changed, like his life before, even before he went to the wall, and then what made him quit, and how he was able to become so respected by true Northerners, because it had to be a period of where no one trusted him and no one respected him because he was a Southerner. Figured that he was soft, like all this shit he would have had to do to prove himself and to unite all of those tribes that for centuries never dealt with each other. I think that would be a great story to read, man. It really would be, and to see. And I like the fact that they really gave us more of this, even though they do refer to them in the show, and I remember when I was reading the books, they do talk about the different groups, but no, it's nice to really get a nice sort of arranged thing. The ones from the caves, ones from the mountains. We didn't really get hardly any of that in the actual show. I do remember they did talk about those bald ones, or the ones with the ash, the runes in their face, with like that scarred cut into their face. I do remember seeing those guys. Yeah, love it, fucking love it. This was a good one. It's a really good one. It's one of my favorite ones. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna do this in about 2 days time, the next half. Loving it, guys. So yeah, what do you think? Write comments down below. If you like the video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I am Ed Breeze, and this has been my first take 2, Histories and Lore Part 7, I think. Season 4, Game of Thrones. Later, people.